so we can get going. Yeah. Do we want to go down just a quick check-in how the last week has been? Anything in particular they'd like to chat about or bring up in today's hackalong? We're focusing on just streamlining the marketplaces conversation. So if there's something in particular that's on your mind, feel free to share.
Okay, I'll start.
Yeah, go ahead then.
What's on my mind about the marketplace is understanding some of the different use cases and what is similar and what is different and that sort of thing. It may not be quite the right group if Kamal doesn't show up and Haspi doesn't show up.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe we hit some of the other flavors, like more, we've been talking about neighborhoods and a more membranes-oriented approach towards marketplaces. So I could share a little bit about that, and that links to our last week's conversation on bridging. So yeah, we could go in that direction. Yeah, anything else?
No, that was it. It's I mean, I think what I'm looking for connects into what you're talking about. So
okay. Yeah, feel free to call on someone else.
Oops, Greg.
Hey, so yeah, Sid, I got your forum chat where you saw my attempt at doing kind of an archiving currency.
Oh yeah, I replied to that. Yeah.
Yeah, man. So what we're doing, I'm actually going to brief on the 11th, Fernanda and Art on kind of an endeavor that we've been creating. We're calling it the Currency Design Skunks. And framing this currency skunk works in that kind of experimental realm. It allows us to do two things. One, we're going to lower the stakes. You know, everybody's trying to do major, currency shifts and, holistic economies. And then we're just going to do, okay, how about you just get a reward for archiving data, video data online, right? And that kind of starts building your reputation as an online learner, right? And then the other one was the showing up coin, which is saying, hey, let's track and give context to where you show up and build your reputation that way. And so then we've come up with a few other projects like a founder's coin, where we're going to mess with the timing, right? Usually you set the condition, then you issue the reward. We're going to then go say, hey, entrepreneurs can probably highlight what they've done in the past because it's not as nimble to, it's more nimble to kind of track and give artifacts based on contributions that you've already done, so you can help define the path. So get that opportunity with that audience to kind of talk to them. And yeah, it's kind of a greater effort from people in those two classes, currency design classes. I was taking one under Grace and one under the Commons Engine, and to try to continue it, right? They created a flow and momentum, and we want to continue that with this kind of design skunk works. And it allows us to fail too, right? When we mess it up, we'll just say, oh yeah, we were meant to mess it up. That's why we set it up. It was set up to do these little failures, right? And I think it's a healthy approach to doing something new, is to frame it that way. Sam, you're next.
Craig, real quick, is there any community that you're looking to ground these reputation currencies in?
Yeah, so we're playing with that too. One of the teammates, Annie, she found a place on Hive. It's a blockchain project where she can organize her artwork. Actually, it's a non-fungible token that you can just create. And then I talked to Noah Thorpe, and he's going to help us clone CoMakery.
Yeah.
And we're going to clone it just to play with it ourselves and do branding, put skunks on it, blah, blah, blah. But I also want to replicate, because some of the way I'm thinking of this too is replicate whatever we do on our skunks to also do it on CoMakery, right? Weave those efforts together, because, I mean, it's more, it is, because we're trying to design this that anybody could then send out. Like, you could put this device, a show up device, on your content, and then issue people out. Like Art talks about, people have to send their own tokens out, right? Your own money, and then make sure it comes back. That value would come back to you, people would show up to your stuff on time or archive your stuff.
Cool. Yeah, keep me posted. And if you'd like to use some of our libraries so you don't have to build some of the stuff out.
Yeah, you sent that, and I was like, yeah, because I'm not a coder, of course not. We're just gonna play with it like
Yeah,
these
yeah.
things manually, until we get this
Mm,
crypto.
mm.
Even at that, we were just gonna take Ethereum and break it up a bunch, like $10 worth of Ethereum.
Yeah, but I would actually argue like reputation is best done in agent-centric environments, and so you can actually use like some of the like the point like one of the reasons we're creating these libraries is so you don't have to code, like you just pop these DNAs into your bundle. So in that sense, you're not actually you're not redesigning them.
Oh yeah, this is all pre-Holo launch.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
a big thing
Got
too
it.
is everyone
Got it.
like trying to find revenue sources
Yeah.
too. So it's all things to help
Got it.
businesses and people build their
Okay.
their.
Yeah, I think you called on Sam.
Everyone, it's been a while. I've been out of the loop, so just trying to re-engage what's going on and what's happening. It's a shame possibly can't make it, but that's the way things go. What I've been doing last week is I had a birthday, so I'm now 47 years old officially. One of my favourites is the prime numbers. I love being a prime number, so that's good. I think 47 is a prime. Sounds like it.
You are a mere youth, Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. And I had a big blowout bender with my mates on Zoom, so that was I don't know if you're aware, in Melbourne we're still under lockdown for another couple of weeks, so it's starting to be a bit of a bummer. From a marketplace point of view, what I've been trying to figure out payment gateways for Loconomics. We got declined by a payment gateway called PIN Payments in Australia, mainly because they don't like the risk of two-sided marketplaces in terms of fraud and that. So that kind of comes interesting to what we're talking about with reputation and stuff, because the current models, there is no reputation, is there? It's just kind of potentially anyone can get on, any service provider can get on, any client can get on, and how do you really know they are who they say they are? There's obviously ways around that, but I'm really interested to find out how. I mean, it's been discussed already, but like to continue it, to say like, how does that get solved on a platform where it's kind of agent centric, so they can put forward what their view of themselves is, and how do you trust, and where's the backup? So if someone comes along and does cuts your tree down, like where's the responsibility lie? Yeah, so that was one question I've asked, because under lockdown, just to give you a bit of background, under lockdown as Loconomics, I've been phoning up all the agencies like the Fair Work, WorkSafe, the DHS, asking whose responsibility is it to make sure that the work being done is being done in a legal way. None of them have any answers. So all of these lockdown laws, the only thing they've told me is phone the police, phone your local police. And how the police are supposed to know, I don't know, but because if they can't give me the answers, they can't give the police the answers either. So it's funny how these the systems that we have in place all seem to fall apart quite rapidly when there's a crisis. Hey Alban, I won't go next.
Hey Sam, hey everyone, very good to see you. I don't have anything particularly to say about the marketplace. I'm here mostly listening anyways, trying to understand some of these tools and see how we can apply them in different scenarios that we need to apply them to. So yes, I'm listening more. As far as personally, this past week, as every week for the past 3 years or so, we are building, we're still kind of expanding our community, setting up the permaculture farm for the moment. And I'm also, because of this past 3 years of looking for property and building, we've left our writing a little bit behind. So now we're trying to catch up and express our ideas and our project a little bit more in detail. So spending a lot of time on computer and trying to write things in clear format.
Mm.
So yes.
So Alban, when you have something written, can you ship a link? I'd be very interested in reading what you guys are doing. Okay?
Absolutely.
Whenever
I
you're
would love
ready.
to,
Whenever you're ready. If you have something
Absolutely.
old, I'll read that now.
Absolutely. I will send something, and yes, I would love to run our project through you. Actually, I've been thinking about it. I was meaning to send you to ask you to have a talk one day.
Yeah, let's do it.
Nice.
Nice. Thanks, Alban. Thanks, people. I can quickly share. There's also been some conversations around the formats of these hackalongs. We've been thinking about, like, I think it served us really well. How long has it been? 6 months now? I'm not sure. And we've been talking about what, where do we go from here? A few people have expressed a desire to dive deeper into certain principles or ways of doing things, and so maybe that's a direction we take. We might have one which is more membranes and neighborhoods oriented, and that's a path that excites me a lot, and I can talk a little bit about it today. There's a few others who want to dive deeper into specific projects they're running. And so maybe we can have specific hackalongs for like Kamal's project or Kiki's project, or maybe even yours, Alban. And so there have been some dialogues around that, and we're thinking as early as next week we could actually start implementing some of it. If you have thoughts on it, please reach out to me, or maybe even to possibly with your thoughts. But we'll talk a little bit about it on the forum, and try and re-energize and um, figure out what that new path is. Which is why today I thought we could just streamline some of the conversations we've had about the marketplace over the last couple of weeks. And if anyone has strong thoughts, on what we should be covering today, feel free to share. But what I can share is, what it's brought up for me is the need for membranes around marketplaces, because a lot of the projects that came up in our hackalongs were communities, might have been Kamal's community, creating biodigester stuff, or Albania community. And when you create a marketplace, particularly on distributed ledgers, and you leave it without a membrane, it's basically joining the same pool of capital that is global. And so there are certain trade-offs you make and exposing it for global capital, because it is technically available for purchase without any membrane control. And so for me, that's brought up a lot of thought around how decentralized marketplaces need to be placed inside neighborhoods within membranes. And so over the last couple of weeks, there's been some amount of brainstorming around the architecture of bazaars. I can share what we've been thinking about or what we've come up with so far. And so there's that, like, how can trades or bids or offers be created within a membrane? And so I think there's one piece on that. And then the next bit is, well, if you're creating membranes around goods and offers and bids, doesn't that restrict you from from accessing offers or goods or bids in other communities? And to address that, we've also created like this bridge type of structure, which allows for coordination across communities or across neighborhoods. And that's really critical because, again, in distributed ledgers, you have to solve the problem of liquidity. Like, this is not a centralized marketplace where everyone's going to come and look for your offer, and so there's always liquidity. But in distributed ledgers, or if it's sitting in different neighborhoods, like, how does that get aggregated and show that bid to the right person? That's one problem. And the second one is double spending. If I have 3 of Alban's mutual credit currency, like maybe 3 credits in Alban's community, I could put an offer to sell those credits in Alban's community. I could also technically make that offer in Sam's community. And technically, how would there be, coordination to ensure that I'm not double spending? And so that's also a problem we've been thinking about. So I can share like overarching thoughts on it, but if not, like if there's also something else that's been standing out for people from our marketplaces conversations, we can recap some of that or go over that. Lynn, I know you had some thoughts. So yeah, feel free to unmute and share what you'd like to talk about today.
I'm puzzling a little over the double spending problem, but maybe that's not that relevant.
I think it's, I'll just say real quick, I think it's part of the bigger problem of coordination, right? Like how do you make sure like that there is that audit of sorts across communities or neighborhoods, across DNAs or across membranes? And I think that's the bigger problem to be solved.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's all right. I'm not trying to think about how to answer your question. I mean, to me, it feels like we want to be as flexible as possible in terms of users. And that's, I want to talk to Kamal, for example, because that seems like a good place to start. I totally get wanting to have marketplaces within membranes. Like, a lot of people I know do that, like people who have time banks, people who have mutual credit kinds of associations. They're high trust, and so they're they're closed. On the other hand, sometimes you just want to put something out on Craigslist, right?
Yeah.
But Craigslist is segmented by geography. I don't know if you consider that a neighborhood. Is Chicago a neighborhood?
My point to that would be there is no validation of reputation using distributed ledgers. And so in that sense, it's not a neighborhood. Like I could just say I'm from Chicago. And so, which is why there's literally no reputational fabric to speak of. It's just, in that sense, also arbitrary, but which is why I think it's fine for very non-intimate interactions. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Oh, I would assume, I don't know what goes on Craigslist, but I would assume like you're not doing high trust stuff on Craigslist.
No, you're like, I have a used couch.
Yeah.
If you want my couch, it'll cost you $30 and you got to come pick it up. It's a lot of them are material things so that they sort of imply a close geography, but not necessarily. And, people, I don't know. I can't say as I'm on Craigslist very often either, but I'm just trying to say go ahead.
I was just going to say maybe a good explanation of this and kind of dating is a really good way to kind of highlight a lot of things. That's why those industries go first in tech, because it's easy to find those connections, right? So I think what we're looking at is value matching, and how do you sometimes even know what your true state of value is, what you need to find, and then you can start matching that with people that have the same wants and needs or capabilities. So I guess in a dating kind of way to say that. So when you look on like, I guess for the group to say, like, there's now apps you get on there, you got a picture and a little profile, and you can say yes or no to people, and then meet up, right? So when somebody puts on there, like, I don't want any drama, that like right there, they're saying something that's completely contradictory to their true state. They do like drama because that's the first thing you're presenting, right? So I always think of that. So so I've been talking to some guys that say, hey, there's some like videos that you can watch. Like people are coming out with videos, and then there's a quick decision at the end of the video. And neuroscientists have kind of developed these things where that decision, even though it's kind of a non sequitur to the value you're trying to find, is so telling in your personality and your state that it can then value match in other non-obvious areas. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because we lie to ourselves, we lie to each other,
Yeah.
we're not honest about our true state, we're not honest with our true state with others, but there are telling things that we can elicit from that to find that true state. So when I hear you guys talk about those membranes, it's sometimes it's about choice, but sometimes maybe it's not. Maybe it's about a non-obvious connection that makes it then a logical, encounter.
I would say it's true, and which is why I think reputation porting shouldn't be done in a centralized way. It should probably be done through an agent-centric way. So for one of the most common examples is if you are part of some community that's running a biodigester and saving seeds, I would probably think you are a good couchsurfing guest. Like that's a non-obvious connection that I would make. But again, for that translation to occur should be in an agent-centric way. And so I might allow you to port your reputation from Kamal's community and Kiki's seed sharing community, but you have that consent to say, okay, like, I agree to port my reputation, and boom, like you show up in my community as a good couchsurfing guest. And I think that's really critical, because if you don't follow that agent-centric approach, it's a straight slide towards surveillance capitalism, right? Like where you're basically all aspects of your life are getting monitored because you don't know yourself well enough. That's the assumption. And so I think that's like I like what you're saying, and I think the way you address that is, therefore there is no like universal template which says this is what a good couchsurfing host is, or that you allow each community to piece that together themselves. Like some couchsurfing communities might think if you are a successful entrepreneur, that's what makes you a good couchsurfing guest. Like that's that community's prerogative. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of addresses your
Well,
issue.
there's something too, like for example, I run 6 miles a day, I bike 8 miles a day, I swim, like I'm a pretty fit dude, right? And then
Is that for
my
real?
dad, yeah, and
Huh.
I've never worn one of these, and then my mom got me one, and I finally put it on. I don't know, I had it for like 2 months last time I saw it, right? And I have high blood or a high resting heart rate. Right, I'm sitting here. I'm at like 90 when I'm just sitting, and then all the literature says it should be at 40. So there's one where if I took my thoughts, like I thought I probably should have good cardiovascular health, and then I put on a device that told me I'm way off. So yeah, you're right. There are times where you don't know yourself, you don't know your true state, and you're gonna need help maybe finding the right spot.
Yeah.
There's an issue with just having these rules, sort of like you're saying, Greg, being what's the way of putting it, like inferred almost. So how your decisions are getting made on whatever platform, either they're decided by the platform you're using, which isn't great, or even if they're inferred, and if someone says, well, why is my reputation like this? It's because the group that you're joining decided that you don't run enough, or you're not part of this other organization, or even more abstract, like it's just kind of like an algorithm that has decided that you're not a part of enough connections, and then you're like, why is this being decided? So I think visibility and transparency is key. Even so if there is some magic algorithm that you can run that decides perfectly, it's still not perfect because there's no visibility on the effect or to the end user.
If we'd like I can share real quick. Just give me a sec. Some of what we've been talking about so far. Can you see my screen? Yep. this is just an initial mock-up. And for those who are interested, there's some amount of interest in this concept of a bazaar, which is a decentralized marketplace placed within a membrane. And so the intention is for every neighborhood to be able to spin up bazaar tools or marketplace tools for gifting, trading goods, currencies, services within the membrane. And I think that's, to me, is the power of agent centricity, right? Like a generic tool like the bazaar can actually be embedded within any community. And so you don't build bazaar as like this app, that global marketplace that people come to, but instead you're building it out as a decentralized marketplace tool almost. And the way it would sit is bazaars would be a bundle of DNAs that sits within any community's HAP, like the overall bundle of DNAs. Some of this naming is a bit wrong, so don't go entirely by it. And the bazaars bundle would consist of different DNAs, like for bids, for offers, for transactions. Each one of these DNAs built using REA modules. Lynn, I'm planning to have Pospi and I are planning to chat about this stuff at a later date. So I'd love to loop you in on some of this as well. But yeah,
Sure.
the point of embedding it within a community is that access to this bundle is only if you hold certain kinds of reputation or have membership to a community. And so only then do you get access to even view the bids or offers or participate in that marketplace. And so, yeah, it's basically these concentric circles, and each neighborhood is basically spinning up DNA specific to them. So they have their own unique hash in that sense. And what's also interesting is, someone like me, like let's say I have a lime tree in my backyard and I have limes to offer, like maybe to the Hackalong community, I would like to offer them as a gift. To maybe, I don't know, the decentralized tech community, I'd like to offer them at 50% discount. And if they still don't get sold at market price to everyone else, like let's say I'm also part of 50 other communities. And in the past, coordinating an activity like this was really hard because we didn't have agent-centric tech. And so as a result, as a trader, I've actually seen this in my lifetime, like there's been a massive consolidation in exchanges. And so we've moved from a vast number of exchanges in any country down to, maybe just a couple, or in many countries, just one centralized exchange. And so this actually allows us to coordinate commercial activity across membranes. So which basically means if I have a bunch of limes, I'll offer them as a gift, I'll offer them a discount, I'll offer them at market price. And let's say someone, in community number 50 wants to buy these limes off me, it needs to coordinate with every other membrane that I made that offer, offer in, to close that trade and to take that trade off that membrane. And so that kind of avoids the double spending problem, because technically if that coordination doesn't happen, and let's say Alban buys it from me in one community and Greg also, I don't know, a day later decides to buy it off me because that offer is still showing, then I've spent twice, and that the problem that we need to avoid. And so this is done through bridging that we spoke about last time. And so in most cases, like I can be the trusted node between membranes. If I'm offline, that communication can occur through other trusted nodes. Like let's say Sam is part of like 3 other communities that I'm part of. So if I'm offline, Sam's online, that communication can happen through him. And so that's how memetic bridges play a role in this, that coordination across membranes. And so it's interesting to me because you can have multiple exchanges exist without with just simple coordination between them. So we don't need to all go to a global marketplace in order to find liquidity. And that to me has been the problem. Like we've gone towards this consolidation and homogeneity because of problems of liquidity and double spending. Yeah, so in that sense, this is an intention of commerce within culture. And so one of the other pieces we've been working on is called the reputation vault, which allows for these mimetic bridges to occur, to be built. And so within any community or any neighborhood, you would have the bazaar's DNA, bazaar's bundle as well as the reputation vault bundle. This naming is a bit off because I was working on this last night. But yeah, that's like the direction in which we've been heading. Yeah, I don't know what thoughts it brings up for you guys, but happy to chat about it.
Yeah, thanks, Sid. That's awesome.
Hmm.
I love the good diagram. I was just wondering, does that mean that if I'm offering my limes on multiple different marketplaces, that all those marketplaces have to know about each other and that I'm a member of all of those ones in order to do that triggering of the event?
Yeah, good question. And one of our design principles is to use bridges instead of like a universal ledger somewhere which just records everywhere. Like instead you have, like if I'm part of 10 different communities, there's bridges to each one of these. They don't need to, so Pospi actually coined this, so credit to Pospi for this, but using that coordination occurs through a standard protocol. And so the bazaar's protocol holds this, which basically means if an offer has shown up in your membrane, all that you're assured is that it is still live and that it's still available. If it disappears, it means that it's been taken off for whatever reason. And that's what the protocol basically guarantees. And so the way that works is, let's say I've shown up in your community and I'm offering limes, and someone decides to make that trade. That trade basically needs to go and the moment I see that bid coming up, I actually go back to all the other membranes where I've made that offer, and it closes those offers in those couple dozen other membranes that I'm part of. But that's how that coordination occurs. If I'm offline, it happens through other mimetic bridges. So let's say Lynn is also part of a community, and she's also part of some other communities I'm part of. Like that's where she goes and communicates it. If I go offline and I have no mimetic bridges, like that offer needs to be taken down. So at no point is that offer being shown without certainty of that offer being open at all points of time. But yeah, to answer your question, instead of a universal ledger where this is listed, like here's 15 places that Sid has made this offer to, instead it's faith in the fact that these bridges are accurate. And that is ensured through, the protocol of, or the language of bazaars, as it were. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're saying that all the bazaars use like a similar underlying structure, software, whatever.
Yeah.
And they all subscribe to this kind of protocol that says when this happens, then make sure that this happens.
Yeah. So which is why we think there's this need for something called bazaars, which is basically, okay, if you're using the bazaars, DNA or language, like you can be sure that this offer is still live or still available. There's other concerns around it because what we're trying to flesh out right now is if I do receive a bid in this community, like, do I have to go and check if I'm live in all other communities, or is it just assumed that no other bid has been received elsewhere? Like those kinds of coordinations will still need to be figured out, because if we just have a system where you go and check in the dozen other communities only when a bid is received, then you'll have people who are fishing, right? Like who just try and like poll just to see if if offers are live and just to see offers. Like, and so that's also what you like, that kind of gaming is also what you want to avoid. So we're trying to figure out those aspects of it. So like I would say those are more intricacies of the bazaar's DNA. If anyone here or anyone watching has insights on this, like this, I'm just bringing in from my background in trading. Like this would be pretty cool. Like in more in the centralized world, like this is really common because you have like main centralized exchanges, but then you also have other allied exchanges that you're constantly polling on. And so as a trader, it was always a problem because the onus was on you to like make sure you don't get hit twice. But with agent-centric tech, like the tech is doing it. So which is why that coordination is a lot simple. Like I would say it's actually the way to do it. Like honestly, I would say this is how tech should have been designed instead of being data-centric. But yeah, that's what we've been working on. Welcome back, Lynn. I don't know how much you missed.
Are you treating the offer as an event in REA? And I wonder too, if you could then, maybe if you treat the limes themselves as a resource, have a available, not available, like, tag it there. And then that kind of takes away from you don't need an
Yeah.
event.
That is that is to be decided. And I think that's where Lynn's expertise and Posby as well comes in. I think we're still at the stage where we're using like simple things like intense commitments, fulfillments. But of course, the limes are resources. Each transaction is an event, and so actually gets logged as a reputational event. And so, if I want to port my track record for selling limes every day for the last 10 years somewhere, that can actually be ported to any membrane. And I think that is really cool because especially in that world, like if I'm defaulting on delivery for that, for me to hide that event will actually be so much tougher if I'm involved across 50 different communities. So yeah, I think that the crux is always bridges instead of universal consensus. So instead of like a universal ledger which is maintaining everywhere I've defaulted, like this information is communicated through bridges, which I think is a lot more useful. But yeah, that is a good question. Lynn, I think you'll have a lot of thoughts on this.
I mean, I told you I have that experience with Palantir, and what we used to do is a lot more simple to tie everything kind of to the entity, especially individuals. But I wasn't worried about reputation. But yeah, now that you throw that reputation, yeah, you want to track the events because those events are tied to your reputation. Everything, right? That the lines are actually moved, like a lot is attached if you treat it or as an event.
Yeah, and I think so far that reputation has been enforced through like an entity like Amazon, right? Like, or big platforms, and which is why you get the rise of big platforms, because they're using consensus to hold reputation data. And I think that's the moment you take reputation back to the agent side, then you get new kinds of organizing. But Lynn, back to the REA question. I guess like intense commitments, fulfillments would be the modules that we use for simple trades like these. Like, let's say I want to sell a bunch of limes in a community.
So if you want to sell a bunch of limes, yeah, that's an intent. If you want to record that people have agreed on something, those are commitments. And then if you want to record that the limes went from you to me, that's an event, an economic event.
And that's also
now, those aren't the
fulfillment,
modules necessarily. I'm not totally sure how POSPI has that stuff chunked up. I think observation layer is that's where the events live, and the actual resources. Everything in the real world that happens lives on the observation layer. And the planning layer has intents and commitments and agreements and, production plans, which I know we're not talking about here, but, it means planning. And the knowledge layer is like the types, the, policies, recipes.
Hmm. Would we use the knowledge layer here?
Probably not.
Hmm.
Well, you'd need a couple things. You're going to need like what we call resource specifications from the knowledge layer.
So if these limes were organic or not, like that kind of information?
Well, yeah, any kind of as exact a definition as you want, and a way you wouldn't probably have to use the knowledge layer, because you could use somebody's taxonomy.
Hmm.
You know, if everybody kind of agrees or doesn't agree, and you try to map stuff, you know, and if you want kind of general search term definitions, you know, you could probably get away without the knowledge layer. The knowledge layer contains like more specifically defined types of resources. Like if you are, if you want to sell your Schwinn bike, you know, part, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not part number. It's not serial number. Anyway, some kind of like
Model number.
Identifying model number. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's pretty specific, and that's probably a resource specification on the knowledge layer for you to refer to that. So the more specific, you know, if you just want to say, I got limes, they're in my tree, come and get them or whatever. Then that's probably, you could give that amount of information just off of a number of different taxonomies.
Should knowledge layer be maybe a market price? So the offer is, I have limes and they're 10% under market. And I can say that that's a true statement because I'm getting fed this market data. It's like, oh yeah, Sid's limes are 10% under market.
No, that's on the planning. That's the intents and the, you know, proposals and planning layer. But don't worry about all this. It's like, it's a somewhat arbitrary conceptual way of representing Polo REA, and it's not in code anywhere exactly.
Yeah, I would say it would be fun to break something like bazaars down into more specific REA language. At this point,
totally.
It's just been like at the level of blocks. And so I'll loop you into that conversation with Pospi. I think the conversation is whether bazaars is more a protocol, or is it like a tool in itself, like an app? Like that's something worth discussing. What's also
that's sort of up to you, you know, how you want to use you know.
I guess that's some conversations that we've been having. I will also say what's exciting me about bazaars is that a user should be able to see bids, like what's available at the, in the community centric view. So when they enter Alban's community, someone in the community can see what's popping up, but there's also a user centric view. So I can actually see, okay, these are the communities, 50 communities I'm part of, and here's what's available on my dashboard across all my neighborhoods. And so it's two-end, double-ended. And that's also how we've thought about for the reputation vault. So when you're within a community, there's a view within like who's within the community and what the community says about them. But then there's also a user-centric view of like, what's your view across SAM, across 50 communities based on your interactions with him. And I think it's the equivalent of that is you enter a dinner, like someone invites you to dinner, you might know something about someone because of prior interactions, but that community also, may highlight them because they don't know that, so there's always that tension. So anyway, there's like a dual view of sorts that we'd like to build.
Hey, Sid, I might have missed this, but let me ask you a question about the double spending. Does anybody care if we
let's
go sideways for just 1 minute?
Yeah, I don't think it's sideways. I think it's part of this problem.
Yeah, and I might have missed it when
decentralized.
my
Yeah.
computer crashed, but my computer does not like Zoom. Anyway, it does this. um, does double spending apply to anything that isn't an alternative currency,
Like a lime?
like a lime? I don't think double spending applies to a lime. If you're offering limes, but I don't know. You know, I haven't thought deeply about this really. But if you're offering limes
I think
and
it
you have a lot
applies.
of limes, and you know,
Yeah.
even if nobody's going to pay you unless they get their limes.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
So
I
I,
just haven't like understood the scope of the problem exactly. And if it's in an
yeah.
alternative if it's in a cryptocurrency, the underlying, their
Mm,
consensus mechanism is going to handle it.
mm. So I've been thinking of publishing like just, basic document that outlines the stuff. I would say double spending applies to pretty much anything that is a scarce resource, right? Like it might be limes, but if I've offered my limes to 10 different communities and they get picked up in all communities, technically I may not have enough limes to actually deliver. And so I've double spent or
But
triple
it
spent.
doesn't matter if nobody's paid you for them, right?
Well,
They're
in a
just
sense,
people are going to
it's,
be disappointed, and your
yeah, yeah. And
reputation
so,
might get a ding,
yeah,
but it's
yeah.
not
And
double
so
spending exactly.
so I think of that as the community's problem to figure out what they want to do with it. But that problem shouldn't occur, or even if it does occur, should be highlighted, and then it's the community to decide what it is. Um, and and so I think there's two kinds. One, in the case of limes, like whether or not I have the limes in my yard are certified by me, right? Um, and so I might have a primary community that I offer them to, through which I spin off that intent into 10 other communities. But it's really on me to say yes, they're still available or not, and so that mimetic bridge just checks with me at every point. But let's say it's Alban's community currency that I've gone and offered to 10 other communities, like a crypto coin, then you can't take my word for it. Like you actually have to come back into Alban's community DHT and check that transaction. And so that occurs like in those cases, like a coin or like a community resource, like let's say these limes belong to a community. Um, in that case, that mimetic bridge doesn't go through me, it goes through another trusted resource who's also part of that community. And so I actually want to outline this, like how we would prevent the problem of double spending. Does that make sense? I can articulate more.
The only thing I heard that might be double spending was Alban's cryptocurrency, which was sort of my
Yeah.
question: is does
Yeah,
it
but I'm
apply to
saying with
anything
the,
besides cryptocurrencies? And
why would it matter? Well, I think it matters because what if it is more like, what if the limes, they're not limes, but there's something more critical? Like what if someone's planned, I don't know, bought a plane ticket on the basis of it, or something more critical, like getting to work just through community ride sharing, right? Like that could be like, if like you could also organize critical activities on the basis of generosity and gift activity, right? And so you want to prevent double spending even in technically like non-critical, or things like offering limes or rides or whatever it is. um, or I would say, like, let the community figure out if that is a problem. Does that make sense? Or is your concern more like, why are we bothering about this? Why are
uh,
we so why
more or less, yeah.
yeah.
Or aren't
That's a good
there
question.
already mechanisms to handle any issue that comes up, basically? And there might be reputational fallout.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, it's
yeah.
more like I don't. But
Mm,
this is okay. I'll read what you write, Sid, and we'll
yeah. Yeah.
see if I can
I
See if I
hear,
can.
yeah, I think I hear what you're saying, and I feel like I'm coming at it from I want the bazaars to coordinate activity across 100 different communities, and maybe you're coming at it from like why, why would we want to organize in that way? Like, why can't it? Is that accurate?
No, I think organizing across a lot of communities is totally fine.
But I'm
But
just saying, like, let's say I do offer it across 100 communities I'm part of. It would just be an operational nightmare, right? If we didn't have that basic coordination.
no, I'm coordination is good.
Mm,
But as for, if you have one thing that you're offering, and
yeah.
it's like an airline seat or
Mm,
something,
mm,
and there's only one,
mm,
right?
mm.
If somebody in one community says, I'd like that airline seat,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then you have an agreement,
Yeah.
that intent is satisfied,
Mm,
and then it's just not available. Like and if somebody else if you have a race condition, right, and somebody else says, I want that airline seat,
mm.
whoever gets there first gets it, and the other person, sorry, just sold it.
Yeah, I get it now.
Don't they
But
do this already though? They double book all the time. Well, they used to.
Well, there is that. Yes, they do.
They do
yeah,
do that.
but what I'm talking about, Lynn, is like we actually spin off like multiple intents, right? Like I might offer my flight ticket to the Hackalong community, but also say, hey, my local community in Singapore that I'm close to, like I'm also offering it here. And I don't care who picks it up first, but let's say someone in the Singapore community has picked it up, and then it's up to you, like, and you also want that ticket, like, shouldn't it be communicated to you that this offer is not available anymore? And that can't happen. And so
Sure.
because they're different neighborhoods, that same intent can't, like, it needs to, like, a new intent needs to be created in the new neighborhood.
It doesn't need to be, I don't
Mm.
think. But I don't know. Possibly might have had some technical reason around this, but
Or yeah, maybe, yeah, what you mean is more ontological, like in a sense, like that new community is bridging into this to read that data. Um, and
maybe,
when
or
that,
maybe I don't know. Well, there's a bunch of technical stuff that I don't know.
yeah, because the technical stuff here is like if that new data is being bridged into from another community, how do we also communicate that that offer is not available anymore? That makes sense? Like for when that intent gets fulfilled, um,
Then maybe you
there needs to
update
be a
it.
ping. Yeah, it basically needs to
Yeah,
be a
you
ping.
update it from your side because it got satisfied, and then
Yes,
could that information just flow through exactly the same way the intent flowed through
yes,
in the first place,
that is correct.
and then it's
But
done.
you could potentially hack it, couldn't you? So you could say, all right, I'm only going to
That,
allow
yeah,
I'm not
so
going to allow these marketplaces to know about this intent being fulfilled, and then
yeah,
everyone
so
would still they can buy your limes, and then you'll take
yeah,
their money for their
yeah. So
not their.
if it's like a resource like limes where I have to fulfill that commitment and actually produce the limes, like it's on me to actually like provide the limes, right? So in that sense, yes, like just my one confirmation can trigger that. But let's say it's a crypto coin, or let's say it's Alban's community currency, there's no way for that other community to know that this credit hasn't already been spent.
No, cryptocurrency, I get
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. And so
And
that's
that's already
not a,
handled usually within a
correct,
blockchain, right, or whatever.
correct. Th-
Um,
well, what I'm saying is, like, instead of having a universal blockchain coordinating that, like it actually happens at the community level, and that happens through the memetic bridges. But yeah, to your point, yeah, do we need to have that same coordination for something as simple as lines. I'm saying it can be as simple as just self-certifying, which I think is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it should not, I think it shouldn't, it doesn't seem like a worry to me. Like there might be coordination issues that come up, but
Yeah.
it's not,
Hmm.
it's just like what happens every day in real life. Like, oh, sorry, I already gave that to my neighbor. And, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I just, I could be wrong.
No, I think you're right in the sense that it's self-certifying should be enough for that problem of like goods or services that I'm providing. Like if I'm a designer and I have 5 hours to spare this week, I'm not incentivized to double spend because I can't provide it. And so my certification is enough. So you're right in that sense. So maybe that's a distinction we drive. And so I'll articulate some of that in the document. That's good insight.
And these little loops or data loops get tighter in an IoT and smart metering environment. You know, where you take humans out of that loop, and then the reputation is built based on actual measurement. And I've always had to look at it this way. You know, working for USAID, I mean, it was prove everything, and so and I got introduced to that Raspberry Pi, and I was like, oh, maybe this is what we use to start building little, provable weighting of waste, right? And I can also now measure the true output of a solar panel and all these different things where it's all about prove it. And the tighter your prove it loop is, the stronger your value source is.
Yeah, I think it would also be interesting looking at the intersection of bazaars and IoT. Whether and I think one of the more common or the first use cases we're already seeing is hollow hosting, right? Like you might want to select a host on the basis of the prior track record of how long, how much online they are, which country they're based in, like all of that. And so that could potentially, solve that problem. Or at least that could be an interesting conversation to have.
And that would be interesting. So think of like in a REA, or I don't know what RedGrid's doing. And I feel like REA should be able to handle like renewable energies too, is these solar farms. Do you imagine the kind of credit they could pull if they started creating value just constantly? That solar farm in Saudi Arabia isn't going anywhere, and you can hedge a lot based off of that. Consistency. So which would be reputation, right? If you
if you know what's the word for it, what the
feedback loop that's pretty consistent, right? You're getting a really consistent feedback, something like that, if you were to meter one of the farms in this type of system.
Yeah.
We tried to model an electrical grid with some people in Colorado using value flows, and it was hard. We haven't quite captured some of these streaming resource kinds of things. That's
why I like my village in Africa, because they bring us coconut husks and wood chips, and then we measure it on a scale, and then we issue credits based off that. And what makes me think they're not weighing down the coconut husks or stepping on the scale, for the immediate fix would be have an employee there. But then if you could somehow just tighten that loop by, I don't know, cameras, weighted systems, I don't know, but it's always, how do you game? The other part of it too is if you create that commons, and this is something I've been advocating, that power theft around the world is a sport, and there's a real incentive for communities not to report anybody stealing power, because they're kind of like the Robin Hoods. But if the community strength of the community economy is based on that grid actually working, well, now you have social, not physical protection on that grid. So they will beat and lynch anybody that climbs one of those poles and tries to tap the grid, because it's the cornerstone of the collective economy. So I think that's one of my big, like, I think outcomes is going to shift the dynamic on power theft, you know, in the developing world, because the community will earn from it, as opposed to, I kind of root for the guys stealing the energy from the power companies. You know?
We'll take that off the recording though. Just kidding. Closing thoughts. We're coming up on time. Anything anyone would like to add? I think we've got a bunch of open threads going. There's definitely bazaars and REA. Like, I would love to dive into that. I think articulating the whole double spending coordination bit a little more might be cool and a lot of fun. And Lynn, I'll be in touch with you about that. Yeah.
I think it's really important that we start looking at some real communities and real use cases on this stuff. I know I'm a broken record on this, but it's like it becomes too divorced from, you know, what we actually know.
That's true.
Like, I got a former employee. She just broke up with a boyfriend and said, all right, I'm going to go swing by Europe, and then I'm going to head back into Liberia. So I might have a trusted person that kind of has good concepts of these principles getting back into Liberia soon, barring anything else going crazy this year.
Oh God. Okay. Yeah. No, anything, you know, any of our projects that want to do a marketplace or a bazaar, I think are, you know, let's just take a little inventory of how they want stuff to work.
Yeah, it's a good idea. In fact, Pospi brought it up. One of the formats we're thinking about for the hackalongs going forward, like one set of conversations could be how we're implementing this, and the other fork would be projects who want to use what we're implementing, and so they actually come in and present what they want to build. Alban, like, if you want to do one of those presentations, like, you know, where you're at, what you want to do, even if it's more, you know, even if it's a 30-minute monologue and nothing written down, I think that's still very useful. But like Lynn said, like, I think that'll keep us grounded on what we're building and make sure it's relevant. So that could be cool. Sam, maybe even a Loconomics implemented through bazaars could be a lot of fun. That would be cool.
I was just thinking, so from our point of view, obviously we've got an existing platform, but what if our members wanted to know the basics of what you're talking about? So if I say to them, how do you want to be implemented on an REA holochain platform, they'll just look at me blankly. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So how maybe it's another discussion, but how do we represent that in a meaningful way that people can understand? Like, oh, you need to think about this kind of interaction and this kind of interaction, and then how that applies to a whole. So that'd be really useful.
Yeah.
About
or it may not matter what something is implemented in if it's an existing use case like that. You know, it's like, hey, how does it work? How would that work in this distributed environment we're trying to figure out, agent-centric distributed environment, you know?
Also, why? Like, why? What is holochain really giving us, and what? Like, and I think that could be a very cool conversation. Like, I definitely think, like, the reputation perspective shifts things, and so that would be a fun conversation too.
It does, yeah. But you need, like we've been saying, you need to be clear to the people that use the platforms why it's a good idea. Like,
yeah.
Can't just say, hey, do it. This is going to be great.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that conversation of agency over data is not relevant for a lot of people. But I think
or it's too abstract, isn't it?
Too abstract, or I think it's like the recycling conversation, right? Like, everyone wants to do it, but like, is it actually going to be something we do when it comes down to it? And so I think translating what happens when you have agency over your data, like the way you organize the new dimensions of interactions and discovery that it unlocks, like, that's exciting to me. Like, agent-centric reputation will start ensuring, like, one, people don't behave like idiots when they just, in these environments, and two, like it'll start leading to more intimate interactions, like, inviting people to your home for meals, or like couch surfing in a more meaningful way, or I don't know, more volunteering. Like there's all kinds of. So I think there's articulating that, like about. I mean, yeah, happy to do it with some of your stakeholders as well. That would be fun. Cool.
Hey, real quick, I was just going to suggest maybe even looking at it from shifting from game A to game B. I think this would be responsible. I went back and I looked at some of my old business plans, and I used to always put in there, let's use Palantir. And I never convinced an investor to let us track us, the effort, his money in a system where it's all kind of transparent, right? Everybody wants a business plan to give you the money, and then I don't know what there's really no accountability whenever they give you money. But this was always one where I wanted to like put it into a system like this where you could track it, maybe start it that way, and then frame it in, shifting resources from game A to game B in a transparent.
That's cool. But
And
yeah,
it lowers. You don't have to go worry about a community out in the middle of Africa that's full of a million problems, and then throw some tech at them. I wrestle with that sometimes too.
Cool. All right, guys. Thank you for the conversation, and stay tuned on the forums because we're gonna chat about what the new format's probably gonna look like. Yeah, and open to your ideas or suggestions. All right. Bye.
Thanks.